Some of you guys wanted to go over the sparse array question, which was number 3 on the 2015 exam. So if you look at the sparse array class, basically what they're trying to do is condense information, right? You have a 2D array, but most of it's filled with zeros. So it's a way to compress the data, right? You have a one-dimensional array that holds all the information, all the non-zero information that's in the 2D array. And then when you want to know, when you want to, I would assume later on when they want to represent the array itself, the 2D array, that they would just build it from scratch and fill the zero values in later, right? So you would essentially set up a if-then statement, which is saying, like, if I'm at this row and then I have a value that's in my 1D array that has that row and column and there's data for it, put it there, otherwise put a 0. And you can kind of loop through the 2D array and add the values as you go. But in the meantime, you can compress the data by storing only the non-zero values into a 1D array. So part A was pretty simple by comparison. They want to get the value. A method called getValueAt returns the value of an element in a given row and column from the list entries, right? So we have this list, and I think we have, did they give us the class? So we have an array list called the entries, which makes it a lot easier because then we can add and remove stuff from it, and we can set new values and stuff pretty easily. So the array list makes things a lot easier here. So we have specified row and columns. If the list contains an entry with that row and column, then we return that value. If there's no entry, we return 0, right? So we just go through, and I think each entry, they give us sparse array entries. I think they're assuming, so they don't actually show you yeah, they don't show you the actual sparse array entry object, but I think I have one here that has get row and get column, right? And at a certain point, dimensional array, I'm trying to think, each row, get num rows, return num columns. I'm trying to think where it says, does anybody remember where it says like how to get that information? No particular order. 9. All right, so you're assuming that the entries have these. When I did this one, I remembered I had get row, get column. I don't remember where I saw entries. That's super strange. So I'm trying to figure out returns of value, get num rows. I'm trying to figure out, so the entries, right? So we have a sparse array entry object, and we're trying. It doesn't appear to have. I thought there was a list of what was in those objects. Like that they didn't actually give you the class, I guess. Correct. Oh, there it is. Okay. So sorry, I lost it. All right. So SparseArray entry has get row, get column, and the constructor asks. Remember that the constructor itself asks for row, column, and value. So we go here. The part A is pretty simple. So we go through the list of entries. So it says it gives us public int get value at, and you're supposed to import a row and a column. So what we want to do is we want to go through our list of entries. So I would probably use an enhanced for loop here. And our SparseArray entry object. So we'd go for SparseArray entry object entries, or for each SparseArray object, SparseArray entry object in entries, we're going to check if row is equal to, let's just call this E, right? So our SparseArray entry object has get row and get column. So if row equals E dot get row and call equals E dot get call, then we are going to return E dot, I think it wants you to return the value, right? Let's double check that. Get value. Let's see. Precondition. It returns the value at eminent row index. Returns the value of the element at row index row. So we actually have to get the value if we run into that row and column in our list of SparseArray entries. If we have a value there, we have to return that value. Otherwise, we know it's going to be 0, and we want to put that outside of the for loop. Okay, so I'll go through that with you one more time. So we're going through, we want to find, we have this dual, we have this 2D array, right? And all these non-zero values are stored in a 1D array like this with the row and columns and the values in it. And everything else just gets filled in with the 0. So we want, let's say I wanted to find the value at 1, 1, right? Row 1, column 1. So I'd go through each of these entries in this array list, right? And I'd check row and check column for each one. And if I get a hit on both of these, that means that there's a value in that spot. So I'm going to return that value. If I were looking at 2 and 2, I wouldn't find that here, right? Because there's no value there. It wouldn't be stored here in the first place. So if it's not stored here, I know it's a 0, so I return 0. Does that make sense? Please let me know if you have questions, guys. All right, so this one's a little bit more tricky. For me, the easiest way that I was able to kind of understand it was using a while loop. So I'm just going to go while. This might be a little shaky. because it's a big thing and I don't remember exactly how I did it, but let's just go through it. We're going to write, we're going to give ourselves the ability to remove a column in the 2D array, right? So we need to make sure that once we remove a column, all the entries in that column are removed from the list. And everything that's greater than the column that we're removing needs to be moved to the left. Okay, which actually shouldn't be that hard to do. So basically, we're going to say while I is less than, we're going to say entries size. Okay, then we're going to pull out the entry at I. So we could do this a bunch of ways, right? We could go out. You might be tempted to go in here, and this is an acceptable way to do that. You could take the entry at I and just set variables for get column, get row, and get value, and then just have those in the pocket ready to go. What I would personally do here is probably just set an object. So I would say sparse array entry, and then I just call it E. And then I would say, what's my array list called? It's entries, right? So entries at position I. So I'm going to pull that out. And then I would say, let's go int C equals E dot get call, right? So I have my sparse array entry E, and I want to get the column number, right? So I just make an integer C, and I get the column number from the object E. Then I can just check if C equals the column that I'm pulling in here, so the column to be removed. So if my entry, right, with the column position of C, in other words, if my entry has a column position C that's equal to the column that I'm removing, then I want to remove it. And remember, it's an array list, so we can just use entries.remove, and then we remove at position I, right? Otherwise, I'm going to check if it's to the right of the column that I'm removing, then I have to set the row number, or then I have to set the column number to one less. Does that make sense? Because if I'm removing a column, reasonably, if you think about it, your column number is going to shift to the left, right? So if C is to the right of column, which would mean C is greater than the column number, right? Then I'm going to let's see, I'm going to say entries dot set. Remember, in the array list formats, you have the dot set method, right? And you can set the value at position I, and it's the same position, right? So I have E dot get, I do get row, I think it's get row first. Let's check the constructor. So if you look at the constructor up here, we have to make sure we're doing row, column, and value, right? So we say e.get row, and we already have a value for column, right? And we're just going to subtract 1. And then e.get value. So remember that objects are immutable in Java, so that, and most object-oriented programs or programming languages, you're going to have objects that are immutable. So we can't actually we can't actually remove the old object and create a new one. What we're doing is we are taking the existing position in the array, and we're just setting it equal to a new object that has different data values. So we're getting the old value, right, from here, because these are staying the same, and we're just subtracting 1 from the original row number, and we're moving it to the left. Questions on that one? Okay, so now, either way, if we get to this else, what we need to do is add 1 to I. The reason why it's outside of this if statement is because, do we need to add 1 if we're removing, what happens to all our data values if we remove a value from the array list? It's going to shift all the other values to the left anyway, because so it essentially ends up being the same thing as moving us 1 forward. So if I put this plus plus inside of the if, it would essentially move me up 2. So I only want to move my iterator forward if I'm sure that I'm not removing a value, right? Here, I'm removing a value. Here, I'm removing a value. This is the only place in the loop where I wouldn't be actually removing a value, right? And then once I get outside the loop, I've size, track 1 from the list of columns. So I'm trying to think if this, I think I might have screwed this up. In a second, I don't think we need to subtract 1 from the list unless we're actually removing something. Well, yeah, we're removing a column either way, so we have to subtract 1 from the list of columns. So it does want us, it doesn't matter what happens in here because the number of columns is going to go down. So we do this, we wait till we're done with the loop, and then we do this either way. And that's pretty much it. Part B is a little difficult, but remember, especially for those of you guys that are taking the AP exam, if you forget any of this stuff, like set, remove, all that stuff, you're going to get a reference sheet with array list methods and that kind of thing. So you'll have that available to you. You won't just be in the dark. Questions on that one? All right, I'm here to go over